What's up, y'all? It's been a little minute since I've done a Dariacore breakdown tutorial, so for this one I'm going to show you how to make this electro funk bounce type beat that I have here, and I'll go ahead and play that for you. And so for this one, I think what I'm going to do is split it into two tutorials. This first one is going to be the composition, like how I made all the different parts in this and the drums and all that. And then we'll do a second tutorial on how to mix and master for this particular one, because I've gotten a couple requests for Dariacore mixing and mastering. With that, let me go ahead and kind of break off the individual parts that we have here. So kind of the main element of this track, other than the vocals, would be this little synth line here. Then we have a little texture bounce, which is like an electro chop. So kind of like a little call and respond on that. Then we have the drums here, which are not your standard like funky house drums, but more like hip hoppy. And I'll get more into the composition on those in a minute. Then we have this little pump delay here. Then lastly, we have the vocals up top. I'm not mad, but I know you are. Speeding real fast in a drop top car. So instead of going through the sound design for these four patches here that make up this little section, what I'm going to do is just, it's four different serum patches, and instead of showing the sound design, I'm going to just give away the patches for all four of these, and then the processing, mixer track chain processing for all four of these. So I'll just show, though, that it is four different parts. One is a sub, then we have a mid bass, playing the same notes as the sub, then a saw, kind of bringing some high end in, so I'll kind of mix those now. Right, and then lastly a lead. And the lead plays a couple different notes here, so. Right, whereas these just kind of go with the same flow. But compositionally, what they're doing is, this descending pattern here. And then in the second half, it switches to this like down to up pattern with the same rhythm. That's all I'm going to show for this part. The patches will be in the description for that, though. I just want to move to some of the parts that I think are cooler, like the textures here. So to really quickly run through how I made these, let me unmute this real quick. The philosophy for most stuff in sample packs these days is like make a loop that works on its own so you can just put it in your track and have it going. But that's not always what I like to do for my samples. So this is one that I'm going to include in the Dariacore sample pack along with a ton of other stuff. And what it is, though, is not the most musically useful. So as you can see, like the stereo field is all over the place. The rhythm is not musically, it's not really made to make sense in a song, but what it does become useful for is like sampling the textures of it. So for this, the first thing that I did was use a stereo shrinker to pull the stereo to none. I'll show the processing chain first. That's the first piece of it. So it goes through a stereo shrinker. And if I turn all these off, it's going to be super quiet, but we'll kind of lead up to the top variation. So we have the stereo shrinker. And as you can see, it's like not really even audible. Then I cut the lows out of it. And I'll go ahead and turn all this on because I can tell just by listening to it that I definitely did the processing before I made this sound. So that's one of the best tricks I can give is add a processing chain that makes your sound useful before you start trying to work with it. Because if I was trying to do this without the effects chain, I would have never ended up with what I have. So the next piece of this, after I kind of like make it loud using these two, the EQing this band is to like cut the highs out, is sending it through another OTT. Now it's nice and loud. And then cutting the low end off it again. And then lastly, sending it through a volume shaper, which just... So what I did probably at this point, or definitely at this point, was started with one piece, kind of got that set how I liked it, right? So pick this, kind of do 4 notes out of it. And then go in here and just pick some new, pick some new little slices out. So I'd copy this over, you Control C, and then Control B will get this for you where it puts the next piece in. So I can go. So then I'd take the slip tool here, which is these little dual arrows, and I can kind of slide my sample around now, and I'll actually do all 4 of these pieces at once. And just get a new piece that sounds cool. That's kind of cool. That's better. Because then we kind of have 2 little pieces going. Something like that. So I might even shorten this, pick a new slice out. Just get another little segment going here. So compositionally we have an A, then B, then back to A, then to a C. Then like a little switch up with the same rhythm. So this goes like bop bop, where this one goes like so. Another little section to kind of lead into the drop there. So in context. Then next, what do we have here? The same thing repeats for the second half of this, because this is kind of like my intro bars, then the main section of the drop. Then for the second half, what I did here was did the same trick again, but just using, as you can see, I have like these dark orange pieces. It is the same sample, but like double stretched lengthwise. Right? So it's just twice as long, which can get you some, different interesting textures. And you can see I didn't have to pitch adjust this, and that's because this is in E, which is the same as my Payday vocal. Is that Payday? Yeah, Payday. So then just pick some different little sections out here. I'm gonna just play the rendered result, but just know it's the same trick, but done with different little slices. And then as far as like the composition goes, we have A, again, like a little new A section. So A2, B2, A2, C1. So repeating this here at the end, just to kind of bring it to a familiar territory. So. And then there's another version of kind of the same trick where I'm using, this is what the little lead that I ended up with sounds like, but I kind of use the same trick here. I think I actually sent it through the same synth bus. Yeah, I'm sending it to 48. So the original sample sounds like this. It's another one from the sample pack. And if you don't know how to stretch a sample to be in the correct tempo for your track, what you're going to want to do is take your sample. So this is the sample that I used at its original thing. So not in the correct pitch for the track, but what we want to do here is take it and mess with this time knob. My BPM for this is 165. So look up here in the top left corner, kind of up there, where the mouse clicker is at right now. And you can see there's a number that'll pop up. It says unrealistic tempo at first. So then it'll go up, and we want to just go till that number hits 165, which is the length of my sample. So now it should be in the correct tempo for the track. So let's check that. Yeah, so you can tell it's in the right tempo. And then the next thing that I have to do, though, is get it in the correct key. So it's in A right now. My song is in E. So if I go and show you the piano roll, this is where we're at. We need to get to E, so we can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 up, or 5 down. Let me just show you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Will get us into the correct key for the track. So don't do it in here, though. This is not the where you want to right click and do it. You want to leave that on C, and then pitch it with this. Right, so that should be in the right key for the track now. And what I did here was just take slices out of it, right? Right, so just went in here and used the slide tool again, because as you'll see, I didn't just take I didn't just take what I was starting with here, because it kind of starts with like a little synth, a little run of a couple plucks in a row. I just kind of went and isolated little single hits out and added an EQ to cut the frequencies down and like cut the brightness a bit. And then added this convolver, which is a trick that I use where you put, I'll do a convolver preset pack or whatever, probably for Patreon. I don't have one yet, but when I do Patreon, it'll probably be a freebie on Patreon. Probably sell it too on Gumroad, but where you can take like a little laser effects, and as you can see, there's stereo on this. And basically, because what a convolver does, which I just explained in the convolver speedrun tutorial, but it adds the room tone. It like sends your signal through the room tone and does basically your signal, but the room tone's reflection of it. I don't know if that's technically proper way of explaining it, but what it ends up doing is given these drippy little delays that I could like pitch down or make darker and longer, or pitch up. That's almost more of like a resonator sound. And so I kind of liked it where it was originally at. And then I send that into the volume shaper OTT Pro Q3 thing again. And I get this little sound that I call the Bippy. So that's the Bippy. That's how you make the Bippy. And then let me just show real quick in context. So like the Bippy by itself, and then when you add it to the other elements of the track, it's kind of far in the background. Right, not super present. If I boosted the gain a bunch, it would kind of take over the funk chop. And I felt like the chop was cooler here, this part. So, kind of wanted it to be a backing element to that. So then from there, let me go ahead and move into the pump delay before we move into the last thing, because it's very similar and it's easy to get. So this is the same piece of the track that's playing when my vocal's playing. And so what I did here was added a couple things. So this is again the instrumental. So this piece that I'm using is just the backer pieces of that, you know, the instrumental from the main track, and I'm sending that through a volume shaper. This first one does an interesting thing. So it cuts it into just the transients. Then I had another, you know, it's basically the same principle as the little Bippy delay, where I send that into a delay, and then I pump that delay wetness. So the delay is set to two different things. So the time here, you have to check on the delay, you have to check keep pitch if you use this trick, because what happens in the first and second half is it goes from being quarters to eighths in the second half. So the time is getting automated, as you'll be able to see here. And if you don't have keep pitch on, just notice this is what happens. There's like a little wonky bend in the sound, so I just turned my dryness back up. Then the next thing that I have here is another plugin where the wetness is being automated by this first automation lane that's like a double pump, different volumes. And the way that I typically will set something up like this is I'll turn the dryness all the way off. And then just kind of like mess with the settings here. That's a little too patty. Right, if I turn this up too high, you get too much bleed through on the notes. Right, I don't want that. I want it short to where it's kind of segments of the sound. And then I also didn't want too much highs in it. So that'll take the highs off. I could have took more of the lows out. That would have probably been wise, but I didn't do it at the time. So then next I send both of those into another volume shaper. So as you can see here, our first one is cutting it into segments for the delay to like delay out, right? So this first piece is setting it up to where the delay and the reverb can have space and it's not just a big sound sandwich there. So kind of again segmenting the beginning part of it, and then this is pumping the end part. So then I send it through a Pro Q3 and really just cut the frequencies on it. Because again, this is a backing element. And then I do an EQ. I'm sorry, a compressor to kind of bring the shape of it down. Right, so glue these pieces together, and then an OTT to glue them together even more. Now you might have noticed there's another thing that switches in the first and second half, and that is the channel pitch, which is this, and this knob is affecting this. It turns it up 12 semitones. So if I turn my effects off, you'll be able to clearly tell what this does. So that's the first half. Right, really cute, nice little effect that has on the second half of this. Oh, and then lastly, I missed this. This should be also on. And so what having the dryness on the reverb does, the dryness on the delay is on as well, but that lets these little reverb slices that I've made here decay out instead of cutting them out. Right, that's just the tone of the room that I'm sending the reverb, right? It's just the reverb. I want the dryness to be in there too, so the slices will stand out. So moving to the next piece there, that's just a nice little effects trick. You can always get good pumps by doing stuff like that, or good backing elements. So the next two pieces that we have here, one of them is going to be another use of kind of the same thing that I did with the funk chop up top, the texture bounce type deal. I have another texture that's also going to be in the sample pack. It sounds like this. Right, and the key on that one is D, so I took it, pitched it up to be E, so that's 2 semitones up. And then I did not have to mess with the time stretching or anything, and then just found a little segment of it. Like there's a little squealy top end that fades into a sub hit. And the timing I did for that was not where the sub hit hits on the thing, but almost like at the end of that there. So in context with the track, I didn't want the sub hit to be that early. That would probably work, but I kind of like this swing better. It just feels like it sweeps up into it more. And then the other thing that I did here is instead of having my riser sweep go into that next kick like this. All right, let me make that louder. I use a riser sweep in front of the snare. So it sweeps into the snare and then also sweeps, and I'll turn all three of these up a bit and then turn them back down. It sweeps into the different segments that I have here. So, right, first here we go into the snare, so this piece. And then the next piece is accentuating the little glitch piece that I have here. So it's going into the sub. So this one ends where this one right here ends where the sub hits, and this piece is like a little tail to end, right, to run into that and give the sub some high end. So at correct volumes, they kind of sound like this. Right, so just kind of sweeping into that, and then adding the other elements of the track back to it. Right, so it gives it like a cool little suction-y, pre-droppy. Right, so that's how that goes. Then we have this, which is a piece that I pulled off the pump delay, and then just panned the sides on it. And I use this to sweep between the left and right channel, if you can hear, pay attention to the placement in the ears. But with that, I think the last thing that we have to go through, I will spend a second just talking about, I'm going to completely skip the intro here. Just know this is the fastest that I can explain this. We have 3 different things happening here to kind of make this fade into a drop. So one is going to be, I have 2 risers. Right. One is noise. One's like a laser sweep that I will note. I took the top end of it off because it gets really bright up top at the end, to the point where it's brighter than my drop. So that's one mixing trick. Right, it's so bright there that it's taking away from the drop. Right, as you can see, that's much, much better as far as mixing goes. So there's one little mixing tip for you. So but doing 2 noise risers together is kind of just putting a hat on a hat. If you want to do 2 risers, probably try doing like one that's more tonal, or one that's more like frequency based and not so noise based. And then also, having those go into a sub sweep there is useful. And then again, I just have like a variation on the house chop to set up the pre-drop. Right, and it's in the same rhythm here. You know, these two are kind of the same rhythm that I have going. One leads into two little bumps there. So then the vocals cut out before the drop. So that's one thing. The last little two pieces here are I have a master cut. This goes into the pre-master, so this is cutting the lows off of the entire track. But the texture bounce doesn't have any low end anyway, so it doesn't really affect that. And then I have another low pass that's sweeping up on my synth mix for the main synths. And I'm kind of trying to follow my filters here, or follow my noise. Right, so not like beating them to the punch. So if I had it like this, they're kind of, you know, at that point it's a little too quick where I'm not letting it build that much. You can kind of experiment with that and get it to whatever you like it to be though. So then lastly, I have a couple things on the vocals here. So what we're doing as far as vocal processing on this is really simple. They did a good job processing the vocals of the original track, so I don't have to do too much to it. Whoa, what was it originally routed to? 22. So all I have this going through is a Fruity Convolver that I've set to this weird space there. And that's completely off. I use that on the intro to fade in right, almost like a low pass filter where I'm fading it out of this weird space. Then next I have the formant shift, which is I'm using Stretch Pro, and I'm just kind of fading the formants up. So as you can see, it's kind of fed the formants up there while the convolver goes down. So then the main piece of this I'm not mad, but I know you are. Thing, I'm just really compressing it super fast just to make all the pieces loud. So without this compressor, like without this, it kind of when the convolver's turned on, right, it's really quiet when that convolver's in any kind of wetness. So this is just to kind of glue the space together for that convolver, because I do turn the convolver back on for the second half. Then I have a second set of effects going on for this, and that is the double pump. So what the double pump is in this vocal originally I had it pumping and doing yeah, did this go through 15? Yeah, so what I did was I sent this vocal originally through 15, used a, what is that, a dry level? Yeah. Used a vocal, you know, a fruity send. I'm not mad, but I know you are. I'm not mad, but I know you are. Real fast in a drop top car. And then sped that up for the second half. So that right there rendered that, and that is what this is down here. The only trick is, the reason that I did that is because I wanted to do vocal doubling on this one. What I did was send this through a pitch shifter. So this is, I took this first piece that I just was showing that I made with this fruity pump thing, this little automation onto the fruity sends dry level, right? This is what that automation clip is controlling. So rendered that to audio, sent it to a couple effects, and what the effects are, if I turn them on, is first of all a pitch shifter. And you look at the pitch shifter, you say, why have you done this? Because it's a pitch shifter with 0% pitch change. I'm not changing it to a higher pitch. And so what this does is, when the mix is turned all the way up, I'm not mad, but I know you are, it kind of sounds like it's not doing anything. But once you kind of fade the mix down, you'll notice I'm not mad, but I know you are. Fast in a drop top car. It's making like a second copy of the vocals that, as you can kind of see here, I'm not mad, but I know is like slightly
I'm not mad, but I know you are.
Out of phase. It's almost like delayed or something.
I'm not mad, but I know you are. Speeding real fast in a drop top car. I'm not mad, but
so by having that all the way wet with the mix, then I basically have a vocal double that I can use.
I'm not mad, but I know you are. Speeding real fast in a drop top.
Let me turn my shifter back on.
I'm not mad, but I know you are.
I have like an instant double of my vocal that I can use. Then also I'm using a chorus on this to give it more width.
I'm not mad, but I know you are.
Sending it through a wave shaper.
I'm not mad, but I know you are.
To like act as compression. And then lastly,
I'm not mad, but I know you are.
cutting a bunch of frequencies out of it. As I raise this up, you can kind of hear this cool.
I'm not mad, but I know you are. Speeding real fast in a drop top car. I'm not mad, but I know you are.
It might be a little too quiet in the mix right now, but I think you get the idea. It's basically just doing a vocal double of that. You could probably turn this up louder and get a better,
I'm not mad, but I know you are. Speeding real
more
fast.
pronounced effect out of it. It's just a way of having that, because I already have like a reverb layer and another thing. I wanted to have like a vocal double that sounded cool. So then lastly, before I end this one, I want to talk about the little tension trick that I use right here. So if you listen to the drums on this, right here, I'm doing a thing where you have these cool little pumpy, if I turn the drums off and the sidechain, you have this cool like swingy, pumpy synth thing going on, where I feel like if you cut the drums out right here, you know, just by cutting the snares out and not having a kick to lead into that second snare, right, that compared to that, when I do the mix and master on this, I'll be able to slam all the synths out and it'll give this cool like womp 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 pumping synth thing there. So that's gonna do it for this one, y'all. Thank you for watching. There's gonna be a link in the description with the Serum presets and mixer effects tracks for those presets, and then the sample pack, the Dariacore sample pack, is still coming. I've been working on bass one shots for it, like Dariacore bass one shots, so the like rhythm basses, and I'm also gonna do a tutorial on those because that's been probably the hardest thing about learning to make Dariacore, is like getting cool sounding rhythm basses that aren't just like regular dubstep or growls or whatever. So that one's going to be on the way. There's going to be a second tutorial to go along with this one about mixing and mastering. So if you want to watch that one, it should be out in like a week or two. So thank you for watching, and I will see y'all in the next one.